What was your professional occupation when you were doing all of this work?
No relationship to any of it. Absolutely none.
So you were just corresponding with, you were fascinated by this topic and you were corresponding with the scientists as just a reader, essentially.
Absolutely. And they became very interested in the topic, such as Palmer, Oregon Fish Wildlife, and they took me in because they realized they looked at their numbers on the charts, and there was like no, some of the stuff was at the fourth and fifth decimal places. This was what you get in like engineering studies. Um, and when they did, so yes, it was just it was fun for me. I was in the salmon conservation community, and not everybody in the salmon conservation community actually ate salmon or fishing for salmon or whatever. And so I was in the mix, and this just fascinated me. And then I became engaged with the tribes, and then that brought so much more information to into the. And then I said, my daughter was like, so this is 2005 or 2006. I wrote a bunch of papers in the astronomical literature, and my daughter was
Without an affiliation,
huh?
without a
Without
university
any affiliation.
affiliation.
Actually, two of them were the
That's
Griffith
crazy.
Observer, which is the under the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. And how they did it was you had to they did it by a competition, so it's like a few steps further than the peer reviewed. And it's mostly NASA types writing about history of astronomy or something, not what they normally do. So you actually had to get into it. You had to win to get into it. And so I had absolutely no affiliation, but that set me up into a different place. And as I continued to write, and I've been published in the primary literature, they always ask me, what affiliation did you have when you did this? Like, well, I didn't. I was an independent scholar. And they're like, wait, how could you do it? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
because it was interesting to me. This is how I got my kicks. I still got my kicks this way.
Did you
It's
publish
just,
with other authors who were affiliated, or
I didn't. Nope, didn't do it. Well,
that's
the
incredible?
Oregon
That's
Fish and
incredible.
Wildlife, yeah, the Oregon Fish and Wildlife stuff back when was uh, a, it was their data, but they didn't analyze the data, I should say. So they loaned, first, actually, the data was available on the internet, which I downloaded, and then I took it to them and explained how this works, and then they gave me more data. They wanted me to publish back then some of this stuff, but and they brought me to conferences that they had me speak. But I was writing a book. I was writing the book Biological Time, so I wasn't interested in going ahead with writing papers because I was writing sort of this masterwork of how am I going to predict the future of all animal species, and I didn't. But it set me on the path. I've spoken since 2017. I've spoken at probably 25 scientific conferences, anthropology, archaeology, astronomy organizations you would know. The IAU, and biological clocks. I mean, all the board. And I go in as an independent scholar in the first year. This is actually a fun story. This is really so. The first year, like I pitch these conferences, they argue about it. Okay, they argue about whether or not I can have this guy. And I usually knew somebody because I have some history in this. I usually knew someone, and if I got a hard time, I would I'd reach out to my person. I say, go talk to them. Okay, and they reluctantly agree, and they throw me in the poster pile. You know how it works. Okay, when you were undergrad or graduate student, you got thrown in the poster pile, right? Okay, and then the second year I come back, and they were interested, and they put me on the speaker list, but I'd be the 10th out of 10, right? In the session. And then the third year coming back, this is actually multiple conferences and multiple associations. I'm the first of the first. I'm the first of the 10th. And then what's happened now is I'm actually invited to the conferences, and actually not to the conferences, by the session organizers to speak in their session because they want to hear my stuff. And many of these conferences are in Europe, and we've moved out of the pandemic, and I'm not going to Greece or Romania or whatever it is to speak for 15 minutes at a conference. And so they say, okay, we'll have both names on it, and you send us a recording, and we'll just run the recording, even though it is then a mandatory in-person conference. And so there's been stages of this. Okay. And I've started sort of like how you would treat a poor undergraduate, and then graduate, PhD, doc, and the whole thing. But yeah, it's I've been invited to speak at many universities, usually in astronomy, to talk about the history of astronomy pre-Ptolemy, pre-Greeks, and tying it into with indigenous sort of stuff. And my biggest challenge, I'm going to tell you right now, is not getting into conferences and getting published. It's defending my previous published work against people who are now publishing the exact same thing, the same hypotheses that I have been going back to 2005. And I've challenged. I sent you guys over a link, and I did a last January. A paper came out in Cambridge Archaeological Journal, and it came out of Durham University, and the media just all over the world picked this thing up, that somebody has discovered how to read cave art and other iconography. Well, those guys didn't discover anything. Okay. Going back in time, is I had everything that they had, including most of the images they published. I did that back in 2005. And so I called bunk on it. And I said, let's okay, you guys, you can't rewrite me to the paper. I get it. So why don't we do this? Why don't you invite me to give a paper for I have? And why don't you invite me to present on another topic, so we all walk away, everybody wins? Well, the journal came back, and they said, well, before the journal came back, something interesting happened. Nova, Nova PBS, it was like the BBC of America. The editor, one of the editors, I won't name, but you have sent you the name. He read Biological Time back in 2005, and he called this crew from Durham University came to him to do a PBS Nova documentary. And he said, well, Bernie did this back in 2005. And not only did he do this, but he included a lot of indigenous knowledge and biological knowledge, which you have nothing of. You're just throwing numbers at me. I didn't know that until a few days after. Apparently, the Nova editor saw the stuff in the press, and he reached directly out to me and says, you don't know me, but I have 2 copies of your book on my shelf. And I read it a long time ago. And this is what happened. These guys came to me, basically the story I just told you. So they a year before they went to press, they knew that I had the whole story. They knew that I had the story, that the Nova people had it. They knew that it was in multiple publications, and in many hundreds of thousands of people had heard me present this subject on YouTube interviews, podcasts, and in presentations in different forums. So my issue right now is not my path forwards to who's going to listen, but rather who listens too much and who doesn't give me credit for what I've done. But fortunately, I've had people that have backed me up, like the Nova people and others, and they've kind of given me, this is the way to do this.